A woman's peaceful walk in a quiet English village ended in a brutal murder that's haunted the countryside for decades. Who was the shadowy figure in the white van, and will justice ever find him? Hey, don't forget to like, please subscribe for more shocking crime stories and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. It was a gray, chilly afternoon in October 1998, the kind of day that wraps a small village in a hush, where the only sounds are the rustle of leaves and the occasional hum of a passing car. In Ruin High Lanes, a tiny speck of a town in Cornwall, England, life moved at a gentle pace. Doors stayed unlocked, neighbors waved from their gardens, and the biggest news was a farmer's tractor stalling on the main road. But on October 20th, that stillness shattered, and a mystery began that would grip the nation for decades. The murder of Lynn Bryant, a woman whose ordinary walk turned into a nightmare. Lynn was 40, a warm, familiar face in Ruin High Lanes. She worked part-time at the local vet clinic, greeting pet owners with a smile that made you feel like family. She lived with her husband, Peter, a construction foreman, and their 2 teenage daughters in a modest home nestled among the village's winding lanes. Lynn's life was steady, predictable, the kind of routine that felt safe. That Tuesday, she had the day off, so she planned to run errands and take her usual stroll with Jay, the family's lurcher cross dog. Jay was her shadow, always trotting beside her down the country paths lined with tall hedgerows, where the world felt far away. But someone was watching that day, someone who didn't belong. Lynn started her morning like any other. She popped into the post office, chatting with the clerk about nothing in particular. She swung by the vet clinic, catching up with colleagues who adored her. Around 12:40 p.m., she pulled into a nearby gas station to fill up her car. The station owner, a gruff man used to the same faces, noticed Lynn's cheerful wave as she paid. But he also noticed something else, a white van that rolled in right after her. The driver, a stocky man with scruffy facial hair, didn't get out. He just sat there, his eyes fixed on Lynn. The owner couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he brushed it aside. Lynn drove home, unaware of the shadow trailing her. By 1:30 p.m., Lynn laced up her walking shoes, clipped a leash on Jay, and headed out. Her route was one she'd walked 100 times, a quiet lane that twisted through fields and hedgerows where the only company was the chirping of birds. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, where you could let your mind wander. But somewhere between 1:30 and 2:30 p.m., everything changed. Lynn Bryant was murdered, her life snuffed out in a brutal, calculated attack that left the village reeling. A local farmer driving his pickup along the lane spotted something strange in a nearby field. Jay, Lynn's dog, was pacing near a hedge, his movements frantic but silent. The farmer slowed down, squinting through the overcast light. That's when he saw her, Lynn lying motionless in the grass. Her glasses were tossed a few feet away, glinting in the dim light. Her coat was unzipped, flapping in the breeze. As he rushed closer, the truth hit him like a punch. Lynn had been stabbed, multiple times in her neck, chest, and back. The wounds were deep, precise, the work of someone who meant to kill. Her purse lay untouched beside her. There were no signs of robbery, no signs of assault. Just a woman, dead in a field, and her loyal dog standing guard. The farmer's call to the police brought sirens screaming into Ruin High Lanes, a sound that felt alien in a place so serene. Officers cordoned off the field, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene. Forensic teams combed the area, but the killer had been careful. No murder weapon, no clear footprints, no tire tracks. Just Lynn's body and a narrow window of time. Less than an hour between her last sighting at 1:45 p.m. and the discovery of her body just after 2:30. Someone had approached her, stabbed her with ruthless efficiency, and vanished into the countryside, leaving no trace. The village was stunned. Violent crime was unheard of here. People didn't just get murdered in broad daylight, not in Ruin High Lanes. Lynn's death felt personal, targeted, like someone had planned it. The police launched a massive investigation. one of the largest in Cornwall's history. They started with the white van. The gas station owner wasn't the only one who'd seen it. Several villagers reported a similar van parked near the lane, where Lynn was killed, its driver lingering, watching. Witnesses described him as a middle-aged man, stocky, with an unkempt beard, a face that didn't belong. He wasn't a local, and after that day he was never seen again. Detectives canvassed the village, knocking on every door, interviewing anyone who'd been out that afternoon. They pieced together Lynn's final hours. After leaving the gas station, she'd gone home, grabbed Jay, and set out on her walk. Someone had crossed her path in that quiet hour. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The brutality of the attack, multiple stab wounds, no hesitation, suggested this wasn't a random act. It felt like the killer had a purpose, a plan. But who was he, and why Lynn? The police dug deeper, chasing every lead. They looked at the white van's description, combing through vehicle records across Cornwall. They questioned locals about strangers in the area, but no one could pin down the driver. The van was a ghost like the man behind the wheel. Meanwhile, forensic teams worked the crime scene. They found traces of male DNA on Lynn's glasses, a partial profile, not enough to identify anyone yet, but enough to prove someone else had been there, close enough to touch her face. The sample was stored, a silent promise that science might one day name the killer. As news of the murder spread, Ruin High lanes changed. The village's warmth turned to suspicion. Neighbors eyed each other warily. Women stopped walking alone. Doors that once stayed open were now locked tight. Lynn's family, Peter and their 2 daughters, were shattered. Peter, a man of few words, struggled to process the loss of his wife, the woman who'd been his rock. The girls, barely in their teens, retreated into grief, haunted by the thought that their mother's killer was still out there. The investigation pressed on, but leads were scarce. Police appealed to the public, broadcasting Lynn's last known movements on national TV. They recreated her walk, showing the lane, the hedgerows, the field where she died. Tips poured in, hundreds of them. Psychics called with visions. Locals scoured the countryside for clues. But nothing broke the case open. The white van remained the strongest lead, spotted near a chapel where Lynn was last seen alive, parked along the lane she'd walked minutes before her death. Yet no license plate, no clear description, no answers. Then came a chilling detail. A woman came forward, her voice trembling as she spoke to detectives. The day before Lynn's murder, she'd been walking in the same area when a white van pulled up beside her. The driver, a man matching the same scruffy description, slowed down, stared at her for a long moment, then drove off without a word. At the time, she'd thought it was odd. Now she wondered if she'd seen the killer. Was he scouting the area, watching for the perfect moment? The thought sent shivers through the investigation. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was planned, deliberate, and that made it all the more terrifying. By early 1999, the case was stalling. The manhunt had turned up nothing. The white van driver hadn't come forward and no one could identify him. The DNA on Lynn's glasses was too partial to match anyone in the system. The village tried to move on, but the shadow of the murder lingered. For the police, the case was far from over. A small team of detectives kept working, determined to find answers. They didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning of a decades-long hunt for a killer who seemed to vanish like smoke. What happened to Lynn Bryant that October afternoon? Who was the man in the white van, and why did he choose her? As the investigation deepened, the answers only grew more elusive, pulling us into a mystery that's as gripping as it is heartbreaking. Stay with me, because this story is far from over.
The streets of Caracas whispered their names, but the city kept its secrets. Hundreds of protesters, young and fearless, had vanished into the chaos of Venezuela's 2017 uprising. No graves, no closure, just a void where their lives had been. Los Buscadores, the families left behind, refused to let go. Carmen, Rosa, Luis, and their allies chased shadows, driven by love and haunted by a force that seemed to watch their every move. The truth, buried deep, was closer than they knew, and its revelation would break their hearts. By 2018, Venezuela's protests had dwindled, but the mystery of the disappeared grew heavier. Los Buscadores met weekly, their church basement a shrine of photos and fading hope. Carmen Salazar, mother of missing poet Diego, kept the USB footage on repeat, straining to hear her son's voice. Diego, no te rindas. Rosa Marquez, Elena's mother, wore her daughter's sneaker around her neck, a talisman against despair. Luis Ruiz, Javier's brother, grew leaner, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Mariana Torres, the journalist, and Rafael Mendoza, the ex-cop, became their anchors, piecing together a puzzle with no edges. The USB video was their biggest clue, but it raised chilling questions. The concrete room, the hooded prisoners, where was it? Rafael's contacts in Colombia traced the server to a front company, linked to a Venezuelan official who'd defected. The trail stopped there, but Rafael didn't. He dug into Sabine's operations, risking his life. He found whispers of Operación Silencio, a rumored campaign to erase dissenters. No documents, no proof, just terrified sources who spoke in code. One, a former National Guard officer, said, "They don't kill them all. Some are kept for leverage." In March 2018, a new lead surfaced. A woman calling herself La Sombra contacted Mariana anonymously. She claimed to have worked at a 7 facility in Los Teques, 20 miles from Caracas. "They're alive," she wrote. "Some of them, but not for long." She described a network of secret prisons, hidden in basements and abandoned factories. Detainees were moved often, blindfolded to avoid detection. La Sombra promised proof, but vanished after one email. Mariana published the claim, sparking outrage and threats. Her apartment was firebombed, but she kept reporting, her defiance a mirror of the protesters she sought. Los Buscadores latched onto La Sombra's words. Carmen dreamed of Diego, thin but unbroken, writing poetry on cell walls. Rosa imagined Elena, still nursing the wounded. Luis, ever pragmatic, demanded action. He and Rafael planned a risky move: infiltrate a suspected safe house in El Valle, where Cuban agents had been spotted. On a moonless night, they crept through alleys, hearts pounding. The building was nondescript, its windows boarded. Inside, they found bloodstains, zip ties, and a torn protest banner. No prisoners, but the air felt heavy, like a scream stifled. Luis found a keychain, Javier's, with a tiny wrench charm. He clutched it, his resolve hardening. The discovery fueled Los Buscadores, but danger closed in. Carmen was followed, her phone tapped. Rosa's church was vandalized, traitors spray-painted on the walls. Luis survived a hit and run, his arm broken. Rafael warned, "They know we're close." He suspected a mole in their group, someone feeding Sebin their moves. Trust frayed, but Carmen's voice held them together. "We're all they have," she said, her eyes on Diego's photo. The UN's 2018 report bolstered their cause, citing crimes against humanity and 7,000 extrajudicial killings. Yet the disappeared remained a footnote, their fates obscured by bureaucracy and fear. In January 2019, Juan Guaidó declared himself interim president, reigniting protests. Los Buscadores joined, hoping the spotlight would force answers. Mariana's blog drew global attention, and Human Rights Watch mentioned the vanishings, citing 900 arrests in a single week. But the repression intensified. Foro Penal reported 2,000 detentions by mid-2019, many incommunicado. A new wave of disappearances began, eerily like 2017. A group of 25 protesters vanished in Petare, their signs left scattered. Los Buscadores feared history repeating, but a clue emerged. A defector, Captain Eduardo Ramirez, fled to Bogotá and contacted the UN. Ramirez claimed he'd guarded a secret prison in Guarenas, 25 miles from Caracas. He described the pit, a basement where protesters were held for months, some tortured to extract confessions. He'd seen Diego Salazar, alive in 2018, reciting poetry to stay sane. Elena Marquez was there too, tending to prisoners despite her own wounds. Javier Ruiz, he said, had tried to escape and was beaten, his fate unclear. Ramirez fled when ordered to clean the site, code for execution. He gave coordinates, begging for anonymity. Los Buscadores, electrified, planned a mission with Rafael's help. In June 2019, they bribed a local guide to reach the Guarenas site, a derelict factory surrounded by jungle. The air was thick, the silence oppressive. Inside, they found cells, with scratched walls, names, dates, pleas. Diego's handwriting, unmistakable, read, "Stars still shine." Elena's sketch, a faint dove, adorned a corner. Javier's wrench marks scarred a door, as if he'd fought to break free. But the cells were empty, the prisoners gone. A hidden room held files, half-burned, lists of targets, Diego's name circled. A map showed transfer routes to a military base in Fuerte Tiuna, Caracas's heart. The find was a gut punch. Los Buscadores returned, shaken but determined. Carmen clutched the wall scraping, Rosa the sketch, Luis the file fragment. Mariana leaked the evidence, sparking international outcry. The UN demanded access, but Maduro's government stonewalled, claiming sovereignty. By 2020, protests flared again, fueled by food shortages and COVID-19. 4 died in March riots, and the vanishings continued. Los Buscadores faced a choice: go public with all they had, risking retaliation, or keep digging in secret. Carmen chose exposure, her voice steady on Mariana's podcast. "My son is out there. We won't stop." The podcast went viral, but retribution was swift. Rafael was shot outside his home, surviving but paralyzed. Mariana fled to Miami, her blog hacked. Los Buscadores' church was raided, their evidence seized. Yet they persisted, driven by the fragments they'd saved. In 2021, a UN fact-finding mission reported systematic disappearances, naming Sebin and Colectivos. The International Criminal Court opened a probe, but justice felt distant. Los Buscadores dwindled, some families broken by grief, others exiled. Carmen, Rosa, and Luis stayed, their bond unbreakable. By 2024, the protests surged again after Maduro's disputed re-election. Over 2,000 were arrested, 24 killed, mostly protesters. Human Rights Watch linked security forces to 6 deaths, Colectivos to others. Los Buscadores marched, older now, their signs heavier. A final tip came from a dying Sebin agent, confessing to Carmen in a hospital. He spoke of a mass transfer in 2019. Protesters moved to a remote camp in Amazonas. Some, including Diego's group, were spared for propaganda, forced to record videos denouncing the opposition. Others were executed, their bodies burned. He gave a name: Colonel Hector Vargas, the mastermind. Carmen, Rosa, and Luis tracked Vargas to a mansion in Valencia. On July 29, 2024, they confronted him, cameras rolling. Vargas, gaunt and unrepentant, sneered, "You'll never find them." But his guard slipped, mentioning a riverbank in Caura. Los Buscadores, with UN observers, searched the site in August. They found ashes, bone fragments, and a locket, Elena's, engraved with hope. DNA tests confirmed 12 protesters, including Javier. Diego and Elena weren't among them, their fates still unknown. The discovery shattered Los Buscadores but gave them purpose. Carmen stood by the river, Diego's poem in hand, vowing to keep searching. Rosa planted a cross for Elena, whispering, "You're still out there." Luis, clutching Javier's keychain, rebuilt the group, now global. The world watched, but Venezuela's shadows held tight. The vanished, hundreds strong, were more than names. They were a cry for justice, echoing through Caracas's streets, demanding to be heard. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.
20 years after Lynn Bryant's murder, the quiet lanes of Ruin High Lane still whispered her name, a reminder of a crime that refused to be forgotten. The 2016 review of Lynn's case had uncovered a second DNA sample on her coat, matching the partial profile from her glasses. 2 traces, 1 killer and a chilling certainty. This man had been close enough to touch Lynn to end her life with brutal precision. But his DNA wasn't in any database, meaning he'd never been caught for anything, until now. The police weren't just chasing a ghost anymore. They were building a profile from scratch. Behavioral experts painted a grim picture. A man who struck with purpose, who knew the area, who left no trace. The unharmed dog, Jay, suggested he was calm, maybe even familiar to Lynn. This wasn't a first-time offender. This was a predator, and he'd planned every step. The investigation took a darker turn in 2018, on the 20th anniversary of Lynn's death. Police went public with the DNA profile, a bold move to shake the killer out of hiding. They asked men who'd been in Ruin High Lanes in 1998, locals, visitors, anyone, to volunteer DNA samples. "If you've got nothing to hide, help us rule you out," they said. The response was overwhelming. Farmers, delivery drivers, old schoolmates, even tourists who'd vacationed in Cornwall stepped forward, eager to help. Hundreds of samples poured in, but none matched. The killer was still out there watching, waiting, his identity locked in those silent traces. Then came a breakthrough that sent chills down spines. Police turned to familial DNA searching, a cutting-edge technique that had caught killers like the Golden State Killer. The idea was simple. If the killer's DNA wasn't in the system, maybe a relative's was, a cousin, a sibling, someone whose genetic code could lead to him. They submitted the profile to the UK's Forensic Science Service, holding their breath. Months passed, and then a hit. A distant match. A cousin, not close, but enough to start building a family tree. Investigators worked quietly, tracing relatives, piecing together timelines. Slowly, a name emerged. A man who'd lived in Southwest England in 1998, who owned a white van, who left the BC. The police were stunned. This wasn't just a lead, it was a lifeline. They tracked him down, now living under a new name in another part of the UK. His past was murky. History of violence, no alibi for October 20th, 1998, and a white van in his driveway back then. When they brought him in, he was cagey, denying any connection to Cornwall or Lynn. But when asked for a DNA sample, he refused. That refusal was a red flag, screaming guilt. Detectives launched a covert operation, collecting his discarded coffee, cups, cigarette butts, anything that might hold DNA. After months, they got a sample. The result? Inconclusive. A partial overlap with the killer's profile, but not enough for an arrest. He remained a suspect, but the case stalled again, leaving the police and the Bryant family in agony. The frustration was unbearable, but the investigation didn't stop. Detectives went back to the original witnesses, now older, their memories faded. One stood out. A woman who'd been 16 in 1998, walking home from school. She remembered seeing Lynn with Jay, but also a man near a hedge, holding something, freezing when he saw her. 20 years later, she realized she might have seen the killer. Her description matched others. Stocky, 40s or 50s, scruffy beard. Police created an age-progressed sketch, blasting it across the UK. A pub worker from 1998 called in, recalling a strange man who'd visited 2 days before the murder, asking about local walks. That detail, that chilling question about lonely paths, confirmed what police feared. Lynn's murder was no accident. It was planned, stalked, executed. The case grew darker still. Investigators dug into unsolved crimes, looking for patterns. In 1986, 12 years before Lynn's death, a woman was stabbed while walking her dog in Truro, just 100 miles away. The similarities were eerie. Daylight, rural, no suspect. Police retested DNA from that case, hoping for a match. The results were pending, but the possibility of a serial killer loomed large, a shadow stretching across decades. The thought was horrifying. Had this man killed before, and would he kill again? In 2021, the police pushed harder, launching a high-level forensic review with international labs. Using molecular-level analysis, they built a clearer DNA profile, a digital map of the killer's genetic code. The distant cousins match gave them a starting point, and they traced his extended family. The man who emerged had no criminal record, blending into society like a ghost. He'd lived near Ruin High Lanes, owned a white van, and vanished from the area after 1998. Police moved carefully, building a case behind closed doors. Sources close to the investigation whispered that an arrest was near, that the truth was finally within reach. For the Bryant family, the wait was torture, but it was laced with hope. Peter, now older, his face lined with grief, spoke of Lynn's love for her daughters, her warmth that lit up their lives. The girls, now women, carried her memory in silence, their pain private but profound. Every year, they marked her death with quiet resolve, refusing to let her story fade. The village, too, held its breath, the lanes still heavy with her absence. The DNA was their last hope, a promise that the killer's days of freedom were numbered. As I speak, no charges have been filed, no name released. But the net is tightening, the truth clawing its way out of the shadows. Lynn Bryant's killer may think he's safe, hiding behind years of silence. But science doesn't forget, and neither does justice. The coldest walk may soon end, not with a whisper but with a reckoning. For Lynn, for her family, for a village that lost its heart, the fight goes on, and the killer's time is running out. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment. Your thoughts, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.